Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Hare Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Paramam Samparibrahmacharya Sakare Small Tirtha Saraswati Swami Bhakti Jaya Nanda Gori Vaishnava Jaya Ramacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Jaya Names of the whole Sri Krishna Shri Radha Krishna Bhogavna Sankand Radha Kundri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jaya Navadip Dham Ki Jaya Ganga Mai Ki Jaya Jamuna Mai Ki Jaya Guru Dwarka Dham Ki Jaya Swami the Bhaktivinda Ki Jaya All glories to the All glories to the Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So today we're going to listen to His Holiness Bhakti Swami. Can you pay attention so you can be able to take notes? We ask questions at the end of the class. So now we go. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
First, offering respects and honors to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to the many messengers. Just before coming down, I had a chance to embrace about 5 different reverends. See some of them here. They are very people-centered. I'm sure very much involved in their congregations. And we are honored that they were able to take the time in this weekday and we could be together for a short period. I'm just literally getting ready to take off in 3 days to another world tour to Fiji, to Peru, Malaysia, Australia, India, some other countries. And normally I like to be in a quiet space a few days before such travels because it's getting a little rigorous. When you're doing this kind of thing for 30-something years, after a while you get exhausted living out of a suitcase and out of airplanes. But when some of my people informed me that it would be a program with Reverend Massey and Mrs. and Mr. Reverend Massey, I was very excited because I felt, as I always do when I have a chance to come here, that it's something special. It's a chance to bond in a very special way. In my type of work, every audience is another chance to try to reach people's hearts and to try as best as possible to give my heart and to receive theirs. And so the heart business is very powerful, and each environment has a different way of how to give your heart. It's like when you love someone, you don't do the same thing all the time, but there's adventure, there's excitement, there's exhilaration, there's animated chances to try to be there as much as possible for each other. Today is also very, very special, that it's a chance for us to look at one of the great spiritual warriors of most of our times. As many of you have been reading some of my books, and it's one of the themes that we share, the spiritual warrior theme. Sometimes people, when they hear such conceptions, they think warrior. We're trying to get away from war. Yes, we're trying to, as much as possible, get away from waging violence. But we never want to get away from waging peace. Because love is not something that is inactive. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. We are literally made for love. Life is a love experience. It's a romance. And the more that we center toward God, the more that we keep our spirituality as a nucleus, then it becomes genuine love instead of just lust and greed and avariciousness. And so we see the tremendous amount of resources and facilities that are going into waging violence. So we have to have that much more and even more focus, enthusiasm, zeal. We have to be that much more comprehensive. We have to be that much full of enthusiasm. Because warmongers are very enthused. They sleep, eat, drink, war. And we have to eat, sleep, and dream peace. And so as we look at our theme, honoring family, community, humanity, as we look at integral part of Dr. King's vision, it's exciting to me also during this time of the year, wherever I am, because my very, very first mentor, and I've had a lot, and I don't think I've done any of them proper justice. But I really thank so many mentors. And one of my first, but I should say second mentor, my first mentor was my elementary school teacher, who was a music teacher and an evangelist. And so I became a child evangelist at 9 years old, under her care. And so even at that time, I was eager to try to be on radio, be on television. Hopefully it wasn't just to entertain, but to try to share something. But my second mentor was Martin Luther King Jr.'s nephew, who at that time was the executive director of SCLC. And he is now the vice president. Most people internationally and nationally do not know him. They see him, you've seen him constantly in pictures with Abernathy, with Martin Luther King, etc., Jesse Jackson, Andrew Young. But he was the type of person, he was very young, he was the youngest in that crowd at that time of the Reverends. And literally, he was a genius. And so I also take that time to reflect how persons like him had an impact in my own life. Because at that time, I saw this young Reverend meeting with several multinational executives. And even though the environments were very intense, he spoke and addressed issues with such clarity and such desire to see people being helped. And I became overwhelmed to see this very thin, quite thin, and this rather simple looking gentleman. Maybe some of you have heard of him, know him, Reverend Osborne. And that was how I made my contact with Dr. Martin Luther King. I was a teenager, and at that time I was in charge of the youth division for the Midwest of SCLC. So some of the things that I will share with you are not just something I read from websites or other books or whatever, but it's from also knowing the field of activity, knowing the person, knowing the personalities, and hopefully having a chance to grow 30-something years later, after having some of those, almost 40 years later, after having some of those experiences. First, just let me share with you 2 or 3 very short quotes that we hear constantly attributed to Dr. King. Here's from his speech at the Lincoln Memorial at August 28, 1963. And this is the famous, I have a dream. I have a dream today. I have a dream that every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. Rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Well, the theme I would like to take today is that Martin Luther King was more than a civil rights leader. Now, this is not my own interpretation, speculation, something that I'm conceptualizing, but in 1965, he said this himself. He said that I am more than a civil rights leader. We also should be more than civil rights participants, leaders, etc. Civil rights is necessary. It's like the first time I met Nelson Mandela. When I come into countries, one of the first things I do is I look at the newspaper real quick just to get a sort of a wind of what is important for the people at that time. So that when I have the press conferences, I can be somewhat relevant to the issues as I try to bring in basically ancient wisdom. So my first discussion with him was that I was shocked. I had come to the country when apartheid was very strong. I'd made several visits. I have several projects in that part of Africa also. And I was shocked to see the degree of pornography that was in the local newspapers. Maybe only in Denmark. I'd never seen a local newspaper that had so much pornography. And this wasn't a special magazine or something you buy, Playboy, etc., etc. But just in a local magazine that was being delivered to people's homes. And so we began to discuss. And I tried to make some impact that as we dismantle unhealthy structures and bureaucracies and systems that are inhumane to the oppressor as well as to those who oppress, That as we break those kinds of shackles, as we eradicate such, we must be careful to keep healthy boundaries in place. Just like a mother sending their children off without giving certain guidance and direction and lovingly monitoring. It's like sending a ship off to the rivers without a rudder. There's almost guaranteed disaster. It's only a matter of time. So, if one is only concerned with civil rights, this opens up certain doors. But as we are spiritualists, we know that we're not concerned with the right to get drunk with someone, the right to be able to engage in illicit activities in various environments, unrestricted considerations. That just to dismantle these kind of structures does not necessarily raise consciousness sufficiently. It doesn't address the real humanity. And it surely doesn't address the spirituality. And so often before we can become divine and spiritual, we have to first break out of shackles. But once we break out of shackles with that energy, what do we do with that energy? And if that energy is not directed, it becomes turned in on one's own environment. And so now it's not an accident that Johannesburg is the homicide capital of the world. Because when energies have been confined, then it's very important how they're released. Because while there is confinement, one begins to process so much of the mentality that's due to that environment of incarceration. And so as you break out the external and the physical environment, there must also be a dismantling of the internal structures. Because the internal structures are much more difficult. And so, when Dr. Martin Luther King said he was more than just a civil rights leader, he was making a huge statement. And some people in unfortunate high places with great deviation, they heard it. And you better believe they were more afraid of that than anything else. And such a young man at such a young point in time in his life did so many things and left the planet in his 30s. Unbelievable. Winning the Nobel Prize. At a time it was most difficult to do any of these kinds of things. And when he started addressing issues like the Vietnam War and started showing how much he was concerned about the whole of humanity and looking at all aspects of deviation, many people became really afraid. Because the greatest war is never just a war of what you see. That's only a small part of it, just the symptoms. But the greatest war has always been the battlefield of consciousness. In 2 days, I'll go to Detroit and keynote speaker at an interfaith conference. It's a prelude for a World Peace Summit. And one of the main things we will share is this waging of peace. Because often we have this polarity of the complacent spiritualist and the secular activist. Huh? And they have evolved with their own kind of fanaticism. The complacent spiritualist is thinking that God is only in the church, in the mandir, in the shrine, in the temple, in the synagogue. And God is only for his or her particular group, even and based on the economic consideration of that particular group. And the secular activist is thinking that all he or she has to do is just dismantle structures and create another ism, secularism, to replace theocentricity and all of the kinds of things. It's not at all that simplistic. There is a need for a healthy marriage between these two. And when you see a marriage taking place in an institution or in someone's consciousness of that level, that is where there is real power of transformation. When people are distracted by the spirituality and think that it's only about saving themselves, when they think the spirituality is only about their own inner peace, or it's even only about their own organization. And I don't care whose church, organization, mosque, cathedral, Monday it is, God is bigger than any one of our institutions. And so when we have that kind of mentality, we're also adding to the consciousness of war. And when we have this mentality of secular relativism, of moral relativism, we think that it's just about aggression, force, violence, and just changing one system versus another system, or changing one group of people, one ethnic group versus another. It's easy for the enemy to keep on moving forward, because we'll miss the target every time. But when we realize that it's more than just trying to find ways to suffer peacefully, it's more than just having facility of degradation. There's nothing exciting about having more facility for degradation, and so one can be in incarceration while being ignorant. Sometimes it is healthy to be incarcerated and to know you're incarcerated so that you can make steps for real liberation. But now people all over are in states of incarceration because they are being allowed to be enslaved by their senses. And so one who is addicted to so many external things for happiness, it becomes easy to control and bring such person in. And so Dr. King, he said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is transformation. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is not the words of somebody who's just thinking about only his ethnic group. It's not the words of somebody who's only thinking about a certain part of America or a certain part of the world. From time to time, there's always been certain spiritual generals who entered in and out of different environments. And one way to recognize them is the message always has a universal quality to it. Now, sometimes these messages become weakened in the battlefield, and sometimes they begin to forget at different times what they're supposed to be about. But it doesn't mean that they are not carrying a package and a letter. Because a postman has the jurisdiction to deliver a letter, deliver a package. Now, there are times when one gets delayed, one gets distracted. There are times when one gets tired from so many deliveries and such poor reciprocation. And therefore, there is a need in these times when messages have to go out for people to find more and more ways who are giving the messages to bond together to create a greater sense of unity, greater sense of community, so the messages will keep on going out. Because as the violence is being waged, as the clarion calls for violence are going out all over the planet, we're having such a culture of fear, a culture of manipulation, exploitation, and capitalization. So there's a need for weapons of divinity, weapons of righteousness. The spiritual warrior has weapons of love, weapons of compassion. And it's constantly cleansing and preparing the real battlefield, the battlefield of consciousness. Justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. There's a little story about a gentleman who was expert in growing corn. And each year he would win rewards for growing corn. And so one day, the judges wanted to know a little better. How is it that you grow so excellent corn every year? They studied it. And they noticed that he was giving his neighbors first-class quality seeds to grow corn. They questioned, how can you grow corn, be number one, and facilitate everyone around you? He explained, that is what I do and how I do it and why I'm successful. Because he understood that when the wind blows, the pollination from other people's corn is going to affect his corn. You understand? And so he realized while he did what he had to do nicely, he had to guarantee and make sure around him other people were also doing something of high quality. Otherwise, his corn was going to be influenced. We cannot live with integrity. We cannot live in security. We cannot live in peace and in love and not facilitate those in our grounds. Because we are so interconnected. And the more that we're able to recognize our interconnection, then the more we can be able to accelerate our own life while looking around and seeing so much beauty all around us. Otherwise, again, with a kind of complacent spirituality or a secularism, the tendency will often still be on one's own self, one's own group, one's own neighborhood, one's own ethnic group, and we even say one's own planet, because it's even bigger than our planet. But as we live with a consciousness, you've heard it many times, you think internationally and you act locally, but let's add to others. And you work like anything compassionately, and you live divinely spiritually. If we do like that, as we grow our corn, people around us, we give them the proper care, we give them the proper guidance, we give the best advice that we can, realizing that yes, it does take a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to raise an adult. We know about raising the children, but what's happening to the adults? We are all influenced so much by heredity and especially by socialization. Martin Luther King says, all progress is precarious, and the solution of one problem brings us face to face with another problem. Let me read that again. All progress is precarious, and the solution of one problem brings us face to face with another problem. Meaning that actually life is about constant challenges, constant chances to grow through struggling, constant chances to accelerate one's humanity by somehow touching somebody else's humanity, many experiences of being misunderstood, many experiences of failing, many chances to question life itself. Almost every single week, I get letters from people all around the world who are contemplating suicide, dealing with extreme depression, people who are very wealthy, people who are very poor, people in developed parts of the world, people in undeveloped parts of the world, people who are atheistic practically, people who are cultural nationalistic, and people who are spiritualists, and people who are teaching spirituality. Do you realize that nuns, monks, and soldiers are some of the most depressed people on the planet? Did you hear what I'm saying? The soldiers who are supposed to be protecting us, and the nuns and the monks who are supposed to be guiding us, sometimes they are so overwhelmed by their jobs. Sometimes they're overwhelmed in the lack of reciprocity. Sometimes they are so overwhelmed in seeing the degree of the diseases they have to deal with. And sometimes they're overwhelmed because they are struggling, in many cases, alone. With looking around and feeling like, what is going on? In many cases, the bureaucracies or the situations stagnate them and cause them to minimize what they have dedicated their lives to do. You have no desire to do anything else. Millions of people who are in that state. So there's a need to look closer at this healthy integration of bringing real transformation and to grow our corn in such a way that others are growing their corn nicely. One of the things that Dr. King taught us is about power. And I speak this to business groups and whatnot in some of my leadership books, but it has relevance to spirituality. Dr. King explained that power without love is abusive and coercive. And love without power. Let's go with that again. Power without love, abusive, it's exploitive. But if we have love and we don't have power, it's anemic. It's good intentions that will elicit lots and lots of frustration. So we need to have power and we need to have love. And if either is missing, again, it's ending to the waging of war rather than the waging of peace, the waging of love, the waging of higher consciousness, of transcendence. So there are different levels of power. There is first physical power. When you see an individual institution, a country at its most lowest level of evolution, it is mainly functioning through coercion. Physical power. Second level, from the gross to the higher, what you recognize is because everything is in with different kinds of manipulations of power. In one sense, the whole of history is just people, institutions, and national states vying for different levels of power alignments. We hear about the balance of power, struggle for power. We hear about gay power. We hear about abuse of power. So many different connections related to power. Probably everywhere that we hear power, we should really think responsibility. We have a culture of power rather than a culture of accountability and responsibility. We have a culture of responsibility that we look closer to see who are we, what is the nature of our existence, and who are we connected to. What is the most natural thing in our environment in the cosmos, and what is our duty to the Supreme Personality of God. When we look at where the greatest source of power is coming from so we can become empowered, then we have to address power honestly and be ready to become empowered. So the gross level is physical. The second is institutional power. Institutional power often is as gross almost as physical assault. Because some of the institutions are commercial, educational institutions, some of them are social institutions, and unfortunately sometimes even our spiritual institutions. They sometimes attack us in so many unnecessary and unhealthy ways. And it's just as bad as somebody literally beating you with a bat. Because the wounds are intense. Institutions are necessary because they can bring like-minded people together. They can assist us in being able to be reminded about what our siddhanta or what our goals are. Institutions are necessary because institutions create a kind of collective consciousness that can act as a way to motivate us, especially when we're in low ebbs. But institutions can choke us. Institutions can weaken us. And they can disempower us. They can create dysfunctionalism. So institutions are necessary. We realize that we have to do the individual work. We minimize and hide behind anybody's institution, then we miss the chance to grow. And we allow ourselves to be at the mercy of sometimes almost like a physical assault. So what we're seeing today is mainly the main thrust of physical power and institutional power. That's just sweeping. Things are becoming more centralized. The globalizations of markets and centralization of technology. What's happening now is people are being forced where they can't think anymore. All they can do is look and try to find where their credit card is. All they can do is try to find where is the monitor to turn on 150 different stations. All they can do is think about how they're going to minimize the predators who are on their back. What is their time to think about giving nourishment to their soul? They become so distracted by just the externals. People are pleading for peace. But how can they have peace when they are digesting violent drinks, and they're eating violent food, and they are viewing violent scenes and videos on TV? They are engaged in violent types of relationships. They are honoring violent leaders. No wonder peace is eluding everybody. You have to look closer at understanding reciprocity. What we do, what we put our energies into, we get more of that. And if we want to change, we have to change where we are putting our energies. And then we will see a difference. And the change must come first from the interior. We must make a change in addressing the real battlefield. As we go to battle, we have to have our weapons. We can't keep going out into the battlefields of the work, education institutions, and just on the streets is another battlefield. We can't go out into those places and not be prepared with the armor of love, the armor of truth, the armor of compassion, the armor of righteousness. We can't go there with planting inferior corn. We get an inferior product, we wonder what has happened. So then we have academic power. A little more elevated. You know, the intelligentsias, intellectual class, they make so many decisions about what is right, what is standard, what is politically correct, etc. And a lot of what they are offering to the world is just relative moral considerations. And it's based on what is relative and transitorial, and it is not what? Some of you heard me yesterday on the radio. I was telling WOL, I said, look, please, why don't you change your mantra? I said, it is not that information is power. So you stop telling people this. Some of you heard me yesterday. I said, knowledge is power. Wisdom is power. And most important, character is power. It's not about information. Information is doubling every 2 years or so now. Information has a lot to do with a lot of things that people are feeding us as part of the propaganda. We don't want us to think that the more data processing you can do, the more things that you can repeat mechanically, the more that you can show that you have bought a lot of books, is a sign that you have great character and that you have wisdom. We see that there is such a shortage with the people now on the planet who know the price of everything and the value of almost nothing because of a lack of character. And so it takes the people to abide greater sense of character so that they can impact upon the leaders. So the leader will not lead in such aspects of incarceration because they have little character and people do not recognize what constitutes proper behavior, proper character. When they are so bounded by information, you can't examine people sufficiently. Because information is overload now. I get almost 200 emails a day. It's an overload. And so one gets so blasted with things that are in front of you, you have little time to go deep into the interior. And so, if we're only thinking about civil rights, we're thinking about how can I also be able to experience the information? Yes, that's right. How can I get my hands on the information? We want to get our minds and our hearts on the wisdom. Yes, sir. We want to embrace that wisdom as we honor the real sense of transformation. And so then we have what is called intuitive power. Yes, sir. This is what you find poets and philosophers. Yes. It's a little more more refined. All of these is interacting on the planet, interacting with institutions, interacting with individuals' conscious at different times. But now, even more is emotional power. This is what you find the influence from entertainers, from sportsmen, as you see artists and how they have impact on people. It's very powerful of how they enter people's psyche. You see people, they dress like the entertainer, they have their pictures, their photographs, they practically worship them like idols, they dance like them, they sing like them, they cough like them, they sneeze like them, they go to, unbelievable. So they have become possessed in such ways. And unfortunately, sometimes the characters they are imitating are full of degradation. Because they have learned so well through the school of incarceration rather than the school of love, and so they perform as prisoners and they imprison other people's minds. And then we have sacred power. And the sacred power is what we possess in our various religious institutions. Very powerful. We come together and we pray and we chant and we meditate. We come and we perform the rituals. We perform the samskaras. We perform the rites of passages. We come together to engage in a sense of communion.
Right.
But today, we need that.
Yes, sir.
And we need even more. What we need is this last level of power. And this is divine power. Now there's a difference. The divine power is what Jesus says when he said, the Bible says, as many as follow him, to them he gave the power to become sons of God.
Mercy. That's right.
The divine power is when Muhammad had his transition.
Yes.
And he went to the lower planets, then to the medium planets, and then he went to heaven. When he got to heaven, Angel Gabriel couldn't go any farther. And the Quran says after he went to heaven, he went to what is called Sudratil, where he met Allah face to face. So the Bible says, the pure in heart shall see God. So the religious power says there is a God. God is great, God is good, God is wonderful. But the divine power lets us know how wonderful he is. Lets us know how great he is. Lets us become like a puppet where we are used by him. In the ancient wisdom teaching Sanskrit, we call this avesha, where one can become so much desirous to plant corn nicely. One can become so desirous to see others plant corn nicely. One can become so desirous to want to check the incarceration that is now capturing so many people, that such a person becomes so empowered that they break off their own shackles and they get strength to break off shackles of many, many people, because an aspect of God enters into their form, their being, their body, and when it enters into their form, they become divinely empowered and they become full of love to such an extent that they are waging peace and waging love like anything. And everywhere they go, they are love in action. And as they enter the people's psyche who are drunk by the illusions, by the propaganda, by the sense gratification, drunk by trying to follow the fads and the transitory and the relative things, drunk by thinking that they're only a part of that particular neighborhood, that particular gender, that particular planet, and those qualities of love, they enthuse, they share some of their divinity. We need to have people who become overwhelmed with divine love, divine power, because people are now so deeply incarcerated. They are so deeply being controlled. They're so deeply being brought again into the slave ships, deeply being brought again into the extermination chambers. And this time, they do not even realize that they're being brought into these places. Because they are what? They are enjoying themselves to death. And as they are enjoying themselves to death, nobody has to put them in chains anymore. Nobody has to give them gas. Nobody has to take their land. Nobody has to take their name. Nobody has to take their identity, because it's already being taken away as people are allowing themselves to do it themselves, and then doing it on their children, and doing it on their communities, and doing it in their neighborhoods.
Yes, sir.
So just as people are becoming possessed with sense gratification, the zest by karma, by lust, we must begin to find different ways as spiritual warriors to go into any environment.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's not just your own house, your own school, your own business, your own religious institution. You must be able to go into any environment and to help people to begin to become more divine and more loving. And why not? The oppressors, the Satan, the Maya, the demonic aspects, they are going into all environments. They don't say, because you're a man, I'm not going to bother you. Because you're a woman, I'm not going to bother you.
That's right.
Because you got a PhD, I'm going to let you go.
That's right.
Because your father is a doctor, we will pass by you and someone else. Not at all.
Not at all.
They don't say because you are Muslim, because you are Christian, because you are Hindu, because you are Buddhist, because you are a householder, because you renounce it, then we are going to allow you not to be bothered by any temptation. No. It is the forces of oppression say that they are equal opportunity employers. And they have jobs for everyone. And you don't have to worry about a vacation because they will pay you overtime any time that you are ready. And so when we are engaging in waging peace, we have to understand what the battlefield is, what the weapons of the Maya or the Satan is. You don't go out to war with a slingshot and somebody got a bazooka. You have to understand what the adversarial conditions are.
Yes, sir.
So if we are secular moralists or relativists, or we are complacent religionists or spiritualists, we are not understanding the battlefield. And if we're not careful, beloveds, we'll become wounded and become casualties. So this divine power. Now, Martin Luther King, we look at his life, he got major inspiration for this civil disobedience. In relationship to his understanding about love, some things about human nature. He made some connection with Mahatma Gandhi's writings. See, Mahatma Gandhi had this appreciation of what is called ahimsa, or nonviolence. He saw this in Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity, especially the Sermon on the Mount. He saw this with Leo Tolstoy. I was just visiting his place in Russia a couple of months ago. If all these people all around the world who had this interesting focus about some ways of accelerating humanity. Their understanding was that violence breeds violence. Their understanding was something based on you reap what you sow, what you plant. You're going to get something similar. You have to be careful what you plant. So you have this principle of Satyagraha, which means sat, which means truth, and graha emphasized holding firm. So the idea was how to live for truth, to get as many people focused on it, and to hold ground. Now, that can work in some environments. That can work when people are supposed to be proper. That can work when people are concerned about looking proper. That can work when people are concerned about finance and looking good for finance. But when people are no longer concerned about looking good, when they have enthused people's minds where people in general are thinking that looking bad is looking good, they don't have to worry about trying to look good because the bad has become accepted as the good. And so now when there's so much disinformation and so much intense incarceration, people often in power don't have to pretend anymore. They just do what they want to do, and they allow people to accept and think that it is good for them. I think we're not far from understanding that in terms of what is going on at this present time. A few short points. So I want to spend a little time for questions. There is a call now, or there should be a wake-up call for the total revolution. I mean, we're talking about full transformation. What we're looking at going deep, to changing, getting rid of our bad habits. Going deep and looking at each thing we say and do. Trying to do everything in such a way that it is an offering to the Godhead. You don't offer something to someone who is wonderful, someone who is very protective, someone who is very caring, someone who is constantly in your corner. You don't offer them something that is peaceful. You don't offer them something that you don't want. You don't just try to ingratiate them just to get something if there's no love. But you try to offer the best of what one has. Even though we may not have much, we try to offer the best with quality. So this is the time for total transformation, where everything we say, eat, see, do, etc., can be mindfully given and offered to the Lord. But we should look at each other and consider that there is God's presence inside of you. And I want to honor that God presence. And even though sometimes you may act ungodly, I realize that there is a deeper presence. And I want to connect with that deeper presence. I am not going to let you be less than what you are, and nor am I going to be less than what I am by accepting a lesser you. I want the full you, so I can give the full me. You want to get away from this consciousness of fragmentation. I want to end with one or two short stories. We're talking about Martin Luther King. Most of you here from Afrocentric background. Let me just share one African story, African village. This is from South Africa. The tribe is called the Bima tribe. Now, in this tribe, they have a very powerful ritual. You listen to me now. I want to reach your hearts. I want to get away from this thing. So, in this tribe, and this is a real tribe, because the more you kind of go back to ancient cultures, the more we touch upon powerful universals, things that are very accommodating. Today we're supposed to talk about community. Time is out, but I want to do one or two short things. Because community really means communion.
Yes.
It means there's things that we share together.
Yes.
It means we have a chance to remind each other what our responsibilities are, our duties, our rights, and should be our joys. And we have a chance to bless each other. This is what rites of passage is.
Right.
That individual is called out, or individuals being called out based on some important life change that's going on. And there's community to watch them, to love them, to remind them how to do the right thing in the right way so that they, as well as everyone else, benefits. Now there's less and less community because there's less communion. Community means healthy communication. When you have nothing to communicate but information and data, there can't be genuine community, genuine sharing. And it means healthy cooperation. So we don't see communion, healthy communication, and cooperation. We don't have authentic community. We have pseudo-community.
Yes.
Right.
So we have genuine community. Because so many people are living together and are not having community.
Right.
And when we minimize community, we minimize the powerful spiritual army
That's right.
that comes out of community.
Right.
We minimize the powerful protection and the powerful love. So now in this community, in South Africa, when someone would do something wrong, listen to me now, they call that person out. In the center of the village, everybody stops everything. Everybody stops their general activities and comes to circle around this person who has been a deviant. This person has done something that is wrong, that is taking them out of the spirit of what is healthy for the community. Everybody stops because that person is so valuable. That person is a part of an extended family. The family calls the person out, and everyone now starts telling this person what? About all the good things that this individual has previously done. Follow me now. Someone has been insubordinate, has been deviant. People come from all over and they tell this person, you know how you used to be such a good student. You know how you used to work so hard. You know how you used to take such good care of your little brothers and your little sisters. You know how you used to get on your knees and pray like anything when there was a problem, a complication. You know how you used to be so careful about cleanliness. People would come and would be ready to stay for days, for weeks. As much as there was to share, they were ready to share, to explain to this person, yes, you have stole something, you have lied, you have cheated, but we know that that is not the real you. We are not ready to associate with anything other than the real you. We are going to bomb you with love. We're going to bomb you with love, bomb you with appreciation of who you really are. And we're going to bomb you until we have transformed you. And how many days, how many weeks it may take, we have dropped everything because you are what is important. Can you imagine what will happen in our communities, in our families, in our institutions, when somebody has done something deviant, done something wrong, and we show how much we value who that person really is, and we surround that person, literally brought them to the center, and everyone surrounds and lets them know that whatever we were doing, your issue is of so important to us that we have dropped it. You mean so much to us that we've all collectively come to see what it is about us that allowed you to go outside. So we've come to bring you inside by coming around you with love, with concern, with reminding you of what you really are and what you can really do. What about forgiveness and reunion? Where our families, our institutions come together and we go love finding. We reach out to bring transformation. How often do we get into somebody has a problem? We ignore them. We throw them out. We look at them and we think, yes, I knew all along that I am better than you. Because I did not do that. As we grow more and more in our spirituality, we become that much more concerned about everyone. Especially those who are stuck. Especially those who are struggling and who have forgotten the royal path of devotion. We even more want to reach out because as we are feeling and becoming more embodied with a high level of spirituality, as we have been starving, as we are being fed, we want to feed others who are starving. Everything is about relationship. Imagine if you had everything that you have ever wanted. Only for yourself, with yourself, and there's nobody to experience it with. Would any of us be happy? No, it means that everything comes down to some quality of relationship. The greatest aspect of our humanity and our spirituality is how we are able to enter and affect and share with others. So here, this experience of sharing is extremely powerful. We have so many people who are deviant in all of our different communities. And these people are just getting marked off, wounded, devastated, like anything. And so many of them have been touched in very powerful ways because they've been a part of our communities. And we want to somehow not to just disown our brother, our sister, disown our uncle who's now a smoker, a drinker. All of those things have to do with some searching for love.
Yes. Right.
And so many times because they have not found it in spiritual community or sufficiently on the spiritual journey, because no one can keep going on the spiritual journey who's not eventually getting some ruchi or some taste. If you're not getting some taste after a while, you're going to go back and taste the wine, the whiskey, the drugs.
That's right.
Because the body is made ultimately for some enjoyment, the mind is made for stimulation, and the soul is full of eternality, of bliss, and of love. And if we are just repressing, after a while, you can only hold down great power, great tumultuousness only for a certain time, and it begins to explode. We have so many people who have gone on the spiritual journeys and all different kind of traditions. And after so many years, they begin to question whether there's even God. 15 years ago, one of my services was visiting monasteries all around the world. I was shocked to find a number of nuns and priests who have become atheists, even though they have been living in the monasteries for 45, 50 years. Because after a while of just being mechanical and being just like you have a professional soldier, you have a professional doctor, you have a professional teacher, and they know how to talk the talk, but they do not walk the walk. So at the end of the day, they even bore themselves with their talk. So you have people who have become so mechanical in the ritual, and they go to their quarters and they're hating themselves because they realize that their own life is not an expression of experiencing the higher. They realize their own life is that they are like parrots who simply do not have realization, do not have contact with the spiritual dimension. And therefore people who go on year after year, and if they're not reaching, having something higher, they'll begin to go backwards. Because the hunger will be so strong. They're not being fed spiritually. They will look, a starving person is vicious, trying to get some type of fulfillment. Let me give you one last story. Again, this is the East African tribe. According to wherever I'm in the world, I'll give you stories according to your culture, your country, etc. Here, I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm in the AME Zion Church. If you're not careful, I'm going to start preaching in a little while. I'm supposed to be ready to sit down. But you know how the preachers do. Just when you think they're about to finish, they're just ready to take off. So I remember that it's a weekday. But let me give you this last story. It's somewhat similar. In the East African tribe, when a woman was ready to receive a child, she goes to a secluded place in the village and she prays and she tries to hear the mantra, the sound, the hymn that's associated with the soul. You know, in our communities now, most children are out of wedlock. Over 97% of them are an accident. And more than half of them are murdered in the womb. The wombs are becoming death chambers. And majority of them that even somehow escape being killed in the womb are accepted with some anger and disgust. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about real transformation. It's got to start even before what we normally call life. It has a lot to do with what we are bringing in from our consciousness. Life is all around us, and according to our consciousness, we will draw for a certain type of life. Sex is a wonderful chance when it is done with honor, integrity, responsibility, affection, compassion. It is a wonderful, wonderful way to honor the God within each person that allows people to come together to create a presence that they can both godly take care of. And when God, the Lord, is not in the center, then it becomes just people who are looking for their personal gratification while they try to connect with people or others who can accommodate their gratification. They do whatever they have to do to get what they want. This is not family, this is not community. The family is a microcosm of the tribe, of the nation, of the world. When the family units are stronger, civilization becomes stronger. The families are so in disarray, so the civilizations are just going down and down. And now people are calling it choice to have a murder chamber and to kill that comes from themselves. And the majority of people now, especially in the developed world, are considering that to think differently is itself a sin on problem. When the sinful things become accepted as a normative pattern, we know we're in trouble. There's so many things now that have become, that are sinful, and people are accepting it as the proper standard. So one doesn't have to be put in physical shackles when a person is allowing their own mind to be such a prison. So here, there was contemplated procreation. There was a desire to be able to bring forth with love. Not lust, but love. And so therefore, someone being called through love is going to be totally different from someone who has been trying to come and has been murdered and then finally does come, and they come in an environment where they're hearing all kinds of violence around them, all sort of insensitivities, a part of the environment, and then at one point that child comes out and is supposed to be ethical, moral, have integrity, and to be loving. How? Well, we've given them all kinds of things to be different. In our institutions, we need to help people to focus more on what is going on in their relationships that are supposedly about love, so that we can have a culture of genuine love. And so the lady would go, and she would go into prayer, and she would stay until she would hear the mantra, the sound connected with that soul. Understand? Understanding that relationship is much more than the physical, the life is more than just that moment. Understanding the power of reflection, anticipation, accommodation. After she would capture the mantra, she would go now back to the village, and she'd meet with her husband. Huh? With her husband. Not the first person she saw. Not the first person who saw her. You say, I got the mantra, come on now. Man, I saw you, get the mantra, come on. But with her husband. And she would share with him the mantra. So now when they would come together for having union, they would together share the mantra. Repeat the mantra. When the child was in the womb, they would sing sometimes, do hymns, do prayers, to chant the mantra, understanding that so much of the personality is being formed while that embryo is in the womb. Letting the child know that we are ready for you, we have invited you, And we are fully ready to love you, protect you, guide you. Now, when there is pregnancy, the lady now has told the midwives the mantra. And so they are all there calling on the mantra, letting this soul know we are here in community, ready for you. We will be there with you when you come out. We will be there to teach you. We'll be there to guide you. We'll be there through important times in your life because we have called you and we are ready. We have created community for you. After delivery, when that child falls down, when the child has some setback, the mother, the father, members of the community, they console the child with also the same mantra. When the child goes first day to school, when the child enters into graduation, when the child gets married, what do you think the child is graced with? A community and family especially that are sharing the mantra of letting them know, just as we invited you, just as we were there with you as a child, we're there with you now as you enter into this new life. We are not going to let you do anything that is so important by yourself. We are doing the things that are most important for us by ourselves. No wonder most marriages end in divorce. How can you do something so important when we're captured by infatuation? We fall in love with ourselves. We have this idea. We find somebody who put it on, and we say, "Wow, here's my lover." Other people will tell you, "Honey, that ain't your lover," because we will see what we want to see. Yes. And we'll be often captured by the moment. But the community is there to help you in getting focused and looking at the present, at the future, and also will be looking at you as well as your partner to make sure both of you are acting as healthy community members. Now, people are afraid of being too connected to the family, afraid of the institutions, afraid of the communities, because they want to be deviant, to be unaccountable. They are afraid of being monitored. They are afraid of being guided to do what is ultimately best for others, other than thinking about what's best for themselves. They miss the fact of realizing that what is best for oneself, then the more people who do that, the better it is for everybody. And so, as Martin Luther King says, that injustice for anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Understanding how much we are connected. So last point. So now you can imagine when there is marriage, the mantra is shared, the bonding goes on, reminds the person of all the previous love that has come, the previous concern. And as you can imagine, when there is death, then what happens? The people who have been hearing about the mantra, some of them have gone on, but the mantra is still there. And they now are collectively, those who are around, they're collectively allowing the soul to go. They have invited the soul in with love and devotion, with care, with attention, and they have engaged from stage to stage, different important life passages. They've been there to support and to lovingly give attention, and at the fag of one's life, one is able to now to leave with love. What powerful reunion. The previous story was powerful forgiveness. We're talking about waging peace, waging love at a time that practically every state on the planet is engaged in some kind of waging war. And most of the schools, most of the business institutions, and even unfortunately many of the churches, mosques, temples, cathedrals, that people are waging war because they come and they associate. But how much degree are we creating real community? How much are we really connecting deeply in the psyche of each other? How much are we really letting our lives be more and more, we can become puppets and be divinely inspired by divine power. And so I end this by just sharing that, yes, Dr. King said he was more than a civil rights leader. He was sending out a message about his mission and a message to anybody who heard it, that civil rights is wonderful, but it's not enough. We want to honor being proper good citizens in different environments, and people to treat us as good citizens, whatever our situation is. But we want to recognize that all of us are much more than the geographical situation, the ethnicity, the gender. We're all much more than that, because God is much more than that. And we can't become genuinely godly by being fragmented, by being sectarian, by being so captured by the externals and by the lust. And we can't be genuinely godly and just trying to see how to plant our own corn. As we plant our corn nicely, we have a duty to see that others are also, the health is okay, that the psyche is okay. We have a chance to share whatever that we have, whatever little, whatever great amounts that we may have. As we do that, then our corn will definitely become better and better as the environment itself impacts upon us. And so we want to focus, especially in these times, on our individuality, relationship to our family, relationship to our communities, relationship to humanity, at a time when our humanness is getting thrown out by information, by propaganda, by fads, and by sectarianism. So these are times like ever before that we really need to realize that we are already at war. And so are we going to be a part of the brigades of waging violence, or are we going to be involved in waging peace and waging love? And if we're going to be involved in waging love, we have to be versatile and not ever giving up the essence, but we have to be versatile to constantly to look for the love, look for the divinity, look for the righteousness, and be able to embrace it wherever we may find it. Where we don't find it, doesn't matter if it's in our own neighborhood, in our own house. We have to be ready to lovingly to address it. Because somebody else's bad corn is going to affect your corn. And as their corn is better, and your corn is better, we can all be proud about what we're harvesting. Much of our life is a chance to plant and a chance to harvest. And each of us have our individual opportunities and choices we make every day determines what our ultimate harvest will be. A lot of what is happening on this planet now is a chance to harvest. And so there are many evil workers who are working very hard and trying to find all kinds of ways to harvest people's minds. And there are many workers of divinity who are going into different kinds of environments and finding all kinds of ways to try to dismantle the change. The external change first, and most important, the internal change. Let us do our part in being able to help with transformation by realizing that we want to go deeper into the interior as we honor community, honor family, as we carry these weapons of love and devotion. And sometimes we have to love bomb each other when somebody gets stuck, so we can try to get them out of being casualties. Thank you very much. If you have a question, I see we have a portable mic. You can raise your hand and we can try to take a few questions. We sprinkled several things. Our focus is looking closer at the family and closer at humanity. We do that through a deeper investigation of what is authentic community. Authentic community means we have something to communicate. We have something powerful to share with communion, and that we're ready to cooperate. Forced conformity is unhealthy, and excessive individuality is anarchy is also unhealthy. Community must be able to honor diversity. We must celebrate diversity, but we must celebrate unity even more than diversity. If there's not sufficient unity, if unity is not stronger within community, within institution, then it's not really authentic. If people are being forced to accept a certain standard, a certain activity rather, without being educated to do such, people will do, but will also not be genuine. They will not be lasting. So therefore, education, real knowledge, wisdom, that is power, not just information. Mm-hmm.
In some areas of Christianity and even in communities, in psychology even, they say that if an individual is in an environment or a community that is toxic and dysfunctional, and as in the old Genesis, he says, come out from amongst them, and he will develop himself. And in so doing that, if one comes out from amongst the toxicity in order to be made whole, is it an absence of loving that community, or is it being obedient? Is it God consciousness versus society, or is it being true to yourself in order to be able to go back and be true to somebody else?
It's being powerful. Because in many instances where we have to remove ourselves to be able to build up ourselves. Sometimes when we are so close to a situation, we lose our focus. Sometimes when we're so close, other people lose their focus in relationship to us. So there's great power in being directly involved in a situation, in its innermost core. And there's also power in being able to sometimes step outside so that we can have an alternative perspective. Each case, our mindset should be, how can I share, give, and serve the best? So let me move outside of a situation to regroup, to acquire other variables, additional perspectives, so that I can enter again with more strength, protection, clarity, and also vision. It's necessary. If we are too often being only in the inner circle, we'll often lose our perspective. Because life itself is about change. And we can help form the change, not always from being directly in the inner core, but as we move out, then we are able to understand other needs that we have as well as other needs that others have. This is why you find often that you'll see spiritualists, they will be distinctly connected with a particular institution, situation, but if they're really trying to grow, they will also look and they will read and they will gain other information to help them to strengthen their own situation with greater chastity. When we are afraid to see the truth and the love manifest in various ways, it means our own foundation is weak. If we have something that's really genuine, then the more that we explore other authentic connections, the more it will allow us to then to come back with great strength to what we have. See, there's sometimes a confusion between interreligious dialogue. Interreligious dialogue is very powerful. Interfaith exchanges are very powerful. Many years ago, I was giving a speech, actually at the Capitol in Washington, with different interfaith leaders. And I started off by saying, interfaith is very powerful to the degree that we have faith, strong faith, and deep interconnections. And so when our faith is weak, we can't bring very much to the table. And when our interconnections are not very strong, then we come together, we create war instead of acceleration of divinity. So sometimes as we are directly in a situation, we have a chance to build up our faith a certain way, our inner strength. And then as we explore or learn from here, from there, we're able to bring that back in such ways. So it's not only nice, but it's imperative. It's a way that one becomes fortified, and a way one can also check closer to see how universal their understandings are, the acceptance. And it doesn't mean that a person should be unchaste. You know, there are people who are just enjoying the spiritual marketplace. And so they're behind one day, and there's a story in the Rosicrucian, the Theosophists, that this, that, Native American worship. I mean, it goes on and on. And they don't do anything with depth. And so after a while, they think nothing really works because they've tried everything. They've been to all the workshops and seminars, but they haven't gone deep. Let's see. Other questions?
How about amongst your family relationships? Because of certain situations, one of them is either being selfish or self-centered, or they don't love us anymore because they have separated themselves from us. But at the same token, wouldn't it be wise, as you were just saying, even in the whole good community, even if it means your own family members, to actually give? That is the question.
Well, the reverends, they'll be the first to tell you that in so many cases, some of them, as they pursued this life, trying to give themselves to God, so many people, and often those who are the closest to them, were questioning, why do you want to do that?
Yes.
You can love God, but you don't have to love Him that intense. You don't have to be a fanatic. I mean, you can be a fanatical doctor, but don't be a fanatical God man or God woman. You see. So yes, it is often those who are the closest to us will have the greatest trouble with our commitments. Because often those who are the closest to us with good intention, but they see us as an extension of their property. And they're considering that they are not doing that, so why should their property do something different?
Swami, in your book, Transforming Lust into Love, you made mention of how God and God's agents desire that intimacy with us much more than we desire intimacy with Him. And I was wondering, as a spiritual warrior, there are times when you encounter, or I encounter personally, times when if I don't seem to sense that desire from God and His agents of wanting to have that union with me, as much as I feel I desire to have that union with Him. And I was wondering, could you speak to that? I don't know if that...
No, it's a nice question. It's very nice. You have any children?
Yes.
Okay. Your smallest child, what is his age or her age?
13.
Okay. So, especially when your child was even younger, you remember distinct times when you were really there. It's a boy or girl? Girl. You remember distinct times when you were really there for her. But she didn't quite understand it. There may be even times that she felt you were imposing, or times she felt that you weren't there. Often you were even more there when she thought you were not, because you were concerned, I'm sure, about her well-being. And even now that she's a teenager, she's going, soon through adolescence, and she'll have her own identity, which she must have. But, and you've probably noticed that already. But you are very affectionately concerned about her existence, what is best for her present as well as her future. Now you just consider your own love and how it extends itself, directly and indirectly, but how it's there. And imagine that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is millions of times more loving, more powerful, more concerned, and therefore is able to arrange even greater things for our existence and well-being as we turn and accept and take advantage. So you can see it in the same way, that where there's maturity and there's love and affection, there's always some arrangements for one's healthy existence. And even though the rather immature person may not be sensitive or aware, but the solace, the comfort, support system is there. We, at our neophyte status, most cases we are praying, we may not always feel, the reciprocation. Just like a child who may be on the phone or trying to use a computer, they may not be aware of all the connections, that are accessible. But gradually begin to realize that you just dial such and such, and you get this person, and you tune into here, and you get this, and they're just amazed at all of the opportunities, that are accessible. So as we go on in our spiritual life, we begin to remove things that we have put up as blocks. And that love and that reciprocation that has always been there, now we begin to experience. And as we remind ourselves, our spiritual journey has never been just about reflecting on what the great sons of God, the great acharyas, did. It's not that Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Baha'u'llah, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Bhakti, it's not that these great teachers came into this universe to perform. They came to waken ourselves up, to share some of the culture of animated love, and they came to show us what was possible by taking on human-like existences, doing all kinds of human-like types of activities. But what they were really trying to do is help us out of our amnesia, help us to remove some of the fear, doubts, and the information that has caused us to miss the wisdom. And so through their sacrifice and through their struggles, they're showing us what we are to do ultimately to be able to return back to the spiritual kingdom. So they are definitely attentive and are making arrangements, but still we have to do the necessary. Another example is like when your child was small, or some of you have small children, and the kid is first riding on trainer wheels. What do you call them? Is that what you call it? Yes. And so as they have these wheels on the bicycle, and one day you take the screwdriver and you take the wheels off, and now the child is riding the bicycle, and boom, a couple of falls. In one sense, that may even seem cruel. That here, the child was so protected, with the training wheels, and you have taken the wheels away. Right. Child can question mommy or daddy's affection toward them. The child has just scratched their arm, and she's thinking, scratch my arm because daddy took off my wheels. But you are having a stronger vision, and you're realizing that as you take away the wheels, she will struggle some, but then she will be able to ride the bicycle. So there are times when it seems like God is leaving us just to get scratched up. But it's a mercy, and it's a way that we're able to drive, to ride ourselves.
So, Haribo, Hare Krishna. How far? I can hear you. Oh, hold on. Now you can unmute yourself. Yes.
Well, Hare Krishna.
Hare Guranga. Sarika Goswami.
Haribo, that was a very powerful one.
So yes. The takeaway is a long class on our 30 minutes.
Yeah.
The takeaway is so many, I can't even remember all. Anybody want to share something?
Well, I took down some notes. Let me see. Well, Maharaj was saying that MLK, Martin Luther King, was not just a civil activist. So he quoted him where MLK himself said in 1965 that I am more than just a civil activist. So even though he was trying to bring the awareness in civil society, how we are all one and we should love each other regardless of skin color or gender or whatever. But some people didn't see him that way. He also was talking about too much freedom, how he was surprised and really shocked in some parts of South Africa in the local newspapers. It was filled with porn. No, he was shocked because usually you wouldn't see things like that in local newspapers. He also talked about, I think what I took away the most was power. He talked about power and he said, power actually means responsibility. So there are different categories of power. Physical power, institutional power, academic power, intuitive power, emotional power, sacred power, and the greatest of all, divine power. So he was urging us to seek to get in divine power, because when we have divine power, then we can better help ourselves and the people around us. It was also interesting how he talked about two stories he shared from African different cultures. When the woman wants to have a baby, she goes to a secluded place and pray, and then she will get a mantra. I found that to be very interesting. Hare Krishna.
I will. Salika Goswami, anything to say?
Hare Krishna. Of course, I came a little bit in late because I just came from the evening Aarti and the Damodara Stakam prayers. But one thing for me in this class is, which like struck me when I came in, was when he was talking about, before he started talking about telling a story about the particular place of where he's giving lecture, was how he always talked about being authentic and not being artificial in whatever. So that really touches me, and it reminds me so much about the last visit he had in 2003 when he came to West Africa, and how he wanted all of his disciples to become authentic Vaishnavas and represent what Srila Prabhupada taught. He spoke so many things after that, but for me, that's the kind of a reminder message that I take away from this class.
Thank you. China Gabriel. A paper. Oladimeji, something to share?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing Swami today. It's a kind of a mixed feelings for me, because seeing a kind of a genius he was, and reminded me of how we have missed a gem in this material world. He has been so helpful and so useful for this our age, for us to miss him that much. So watching that video, it's like somehow to me. But what I actually took away from his presentation, when he mentioned, Sahadev Prabhu mentioned earlier about, he mentioned categories of power, and the quote he mentioned something about power without love is intimidation or abuse. And I thought about a lot of things, the way our government used to treat their citizen, individual that is on the high hierarchy in the material world, how we abuse each other with the use of power. So I'm now wondering if there is an element of love in that kind of a position, definitely we will enjoy such person handling such position. So power without love is actually an abuse as well. And Salika Prabhu mentioned when he came to Africa 2003, I was fortunate to see him then. I was part of so he came to our center at Ibadan then for a talk. And I can never forget what he mentioned, what he discussed with us about spirituality. Even in that kind of a gathering, Islamic gathering, he actually came down to the level and passed the message to us so clearly, and it was so awesome. That's what I can actually say about the talk today.
Well, thank you, Oladimeji, because that's exactly what Maharaj said. He said, power without love is abusive and it's exploitative. And then love without power is anemic. So the two go together, power and love. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Ayatri?
Yeah, actually, Hare Krishna.
Yes, go on.
Actually, talking about that quote of Sahadev, and I was just trying to, actually that is recorded in his Spiritual Warrior book too, where he talked about that, and then maybe I will share. Just yesterday, I was sharing that same point on my other Facebook page, where he was talking about spiritual revolutionists are compassionate and visionary. When people have vision without love, they will be motivated for the wrong reasons. So it's actually an extract where in Spiritual Warrior 2 was talking about love and power. And then when power becomes devoid of compassion, love and empathy becomes a kind of tool for intimidating and destroying the society. So that's a very powerful one.
Okay, thank you all for your attentive listening.
Prabhu, sorry, I want to ask something.
Okay.
What I also observe about Swami is that his leadership is exceptional. It is quite different from when you have somebody who knows more about leadership but can talk about it, can write about it, but you won't see such in the practical experience when it comes to practicalizing such leadership within the devotee or within the environment or community. So as he is a kind of a person, or it was a kind of a person that actually preached what practice what he preaches. And I don't know how to put it. The question I want to ask Sahadev Prabhu is there a place where we can get his books? Because I visited the temple, they couldn't get me any of his books. And I noticed he has written up to more than maybe close to 20 books or so. Probably maybe e-copy to get online, where to buy it.
Yeah, I will send you the link right away.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll post the link here now. You can check the website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll also want to see more of this, more of his videos once in a while.
Yeah.
Come to class every day.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
You can't see the video when you don't come to class.
King Kusha.
I also love it when Maharaj said sometimes we become so complacent that we only think of our own institution and we don't care about anyone else, which unfortunately sometimes does happen, that somebody may think, I belong to the best organization, I have nothing to do with any other organization.
Vladimir,
which is wrong.
Yes,
is he there?
Yes, I'm with you.
Look at your screen. You get the websites.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
See it?
Yes.
You can copy it and save it.
Awesome.
His books also.
All the books
on
are
Amazon.
there.
His books also on yes, Amazon. If you go
Everything
to Amazon,
is there.
all of his books are
Amazon
there.
link is there. Everything is there.
Yeah.
But maybe probably when I come down to the southwest, if somehow or the other we have opportunity to meet, I might also maybe one or two of his books. If I look at my library, if I still have some space, I will try to send the hard copy to you. You are still in Ibadan, right?
Lagos.
You are in Lagos now. Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll try to find you out if I come to Lagos. I should be able to maybe at least one or two of his copies of his books.
Yes, I really appreciate that. I was talking to my dad last week, and I told him that if I noticed he used to have the Spiritual Warrior 1 to 4 or 5. So I was telling him to help me check his library if you still have those books. So he promised he will help me check, but I don't think he can actually find those books at the moment.
Now
I
you
just
have the
feel
website. All the books are there.
I have the
Check the
opportunity of
website
finding
on Amazon.
mine.
You can get it from there.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm indebted because one of the responsibilities he gave as a last instructions to me is to publish his books for West African readers. But I'm still preparing.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
What happened, Kusha Prabhu? Yaduna, why didn't he come?
We are in class. Come where?
Okay.
Okay, see. So
Hare.
we close the class for today, then after we talk.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram.